Hey there, game show. This is Jamin, obviously. I'm at my office, this lovely office that we have here, and I got some new glasses, which is also pretty cool. And that's the good news. So the bad news is that if you love games this week, this has kind of been a crappy week to be someone who calls themselves, quote unquote, a gamer. I don't need to belabor you with all the things that have been happening, but the short list obviously is Anita Sarkeesian's video and her being forced to leave her home because of threats of violence. Zoe Quinn, another game developer who had a, former past whatever, someone write some nasty things about her on the internet and her being attacked in comments section. We had, this is pretty crazy. We had someone, a group of hackers take down Sony Online, or take down a PlayStation Network and then threatened to bring down the plane of the president of Sony Online Entertainment. Given all the other crazy things that have been happening this summer, obviously this is certainly a little embarrassing for me, just, as someone who loves games, to feel like there is a segment of gamer culture, as it were, that maybe is not behaving the most appropriately. So two kind of big thoughts about this. Well, first of all, I don't need to sort of walk you through my specific argument. I've been through both sides of the debate, specifically around feminism and the role of women in video games. I did an episode about it that I'll link to in the description. I did a companion episode about the disposability of men, particularly in violent video games, which I will also link to in the description. There's a lovely essay, I think, in the new Statesmen, which sums up my sort of thoughts about Anita Sarkeesian. I don't need to belabor you with that stuff here. I have two specific things that I do want to talk to all of you at Game Show about that are definitely related. I think the first is that I don't think at this point we're even really talking about game journalism or sort of our feminism at this point. I don't think we're actually talking about any of those things. I think we're talking about something else. And I think it can be explained by a concept that I've talked about in past episodes. It's known as in-group, out-group dynamics. It's been studied by sociologists, specifically this concept of in-group favoritism. And it works like this. You identify with certain people that you share interests in common, and then you create some sort of social identity. That's essentially your in-group. When someone from the outside comes in and either wants to be a part of the in-group or challenges core beliefs of what your in-group has, then people freak out. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing right now is that that there's a segment of people who consider themselves gamers, have sort of owned that tag, and that they feel basically under attack. They feel under threat. I think understanding that dynamic at least gives some context for why what we're seeing is happening, and I think it also expands it in the sense that this is not something that's just limited to gamer behavior, but it's a problem elsewhere in the world. The second thing is a little bit more proactive. If you're someone who loves games, every time somebody does something, whether it's something violent or something racist or misogynistic or whatever it might be, anytime somebody does something like that in the name of games, you carry that burden along with you. Because to the outside world, people who don't play games, they get a limited amount of perspective in terms of what it means to be someone who plays games. So every time something pops up, and you saw it this week, there are articles in Slate, there are articles in the New York Times, there are articles elsewhere. Anytime something pops up that casts a particular light on gamers, as it were, then we all sort of carry that burden, and carry that expectation with us. And so that means that we all have a collective responsibility to maintain our public identity as a group. If we don't, then all of a sudden you end up with a community that you don't really want to be a part of, which is kind of how I'm feeling right now. Like maybe I feel a little embarrassed about the fact that I have to explain to people that that someone who's giving a critique, regardless of how you feel about that critique, someone who gave a critique of a particular game or a set of games had to be chased from their home because, the internet stormed upon them. That's pretty embarrassing for me. Maybe you feel the same way. Maybe you don't. Regardless, I would ask that, for those of you out there who don't necessarily agree with Anita Sarkeesian, who don't necessarily agree with Zoe Quinn, whoever it might be, take a look at what it is that you're writing on the internet and read it out loud to someone in real life. And if you feel like there's something that you would write down that you feel comfortable saying to another person to their face, then go ahead, hit enter. Put it on the internet. You should feel very proud about that. If you don't, then you probably shouldn't post it. This seems very straightforward, but there's this thing called the online disinhibition effect, where people make a disconnect between what they do in their online lives and what they do in their offline lives. And so I think we have a responsibility, obviously, to acknowledge that and to make sure that we're saying kind and meaningful things. The other thing is that if you're someone who wants to be a part of, this gamer community, and you see something that you don't like, your form of action could be very different. You could just, it could be a simple downvote, it could be a conversation, whatever it might be. One of the things that I've been super excited about, I've been super proud of, is the fact that Game Show's comment section is awesome, right? And it happens in, of all places, YouTube, right? So it's a show about games, it's happening on YouTube, and there's, generally speaking, an air of civility and wit and intellect that's happening on our comment board. So I feel like if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. But we all sort of have to work at it together. Anyway, those are my basic thoughts. It's been kind of a rough week, I think, for people who love games, but we'll work through it. It's growing pains. It's growing pains, I hope. One can only hope. Anyway, we'll be back next week with some special stuff that's happening with Game Show, and I can't wait to share that with you, and I hope that you have a great weekend, and see you soon.